He always sends it out.
You always say that, but I can't find your email.
9:45.
I
he
sent
sends
it out, like, so everybody has the topic.
What, 2
Yes,
days ago or
it's
this
CBS.
morning, before you got here?
This morning,
Yeah, there you
not before I got here.
Oh, that's why I didn't see it.
In honor of
go.
Halloween,
Oh, goody.
good one, right?
We're gonna have spooky stuff.
We are talking about what scares you in the world of real estate and what should.
Scary.
Yeah.
Other agents scare the living.
You look like a
Jesus out of me.
jack-o'-lantern with that finger behind your
Oh, do
head.
I? Should I turn it off?
You've got a glow of
Or just halo, one or the other. The deity. That's
Better? Do I look better now?
Yeah,
Not quite so.
much better.
I don't know why I have to be on camera for this, but whatever. So what scares you in real estate? What's your biggest fear? Be honest.
Going
This is an open
away.
public forum.
The business going away.
Business going away, okay. Demise of the industry. What else? That's kind of a big one.
That's huge.
Well,
That should make everybody's heart.
I don't think that necessarily the industry is going to be in demise, but my fear is that the industry is going to change.
So maybe demise of the industry as we know it.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's going to change, and I feel that maybe I'm not cognizant of the kinds of changes that are taking place and where the industry is going.
So maybe the role, your role in the future, is that what you're
Yeah.
worried about a little bit? Role of the realtor? Or how about just the need for? I mean, because there's plenty of people that are looking at the industry and looking to eliminate us completely.
Right. How does that fall in with the legal aspects as the law is written? We have laws on the books, regulations.
But there's nothing that says that people can't transact their business on their own.
You can convey title, anybody can convey title.
Right.
Okay,
I mean,
so
for sale by owners and buy by owner is
right, but I'm
perfectly legal.
Like, at
somebody
least
like
an
I
attorney.
had out and that wanted to do this on a bill of sale.
Yeah, well, there's also the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it, but that's a whole nother, so that kind of gets into the role of the realtor, right? Is what is our job?
That's what I'm suggesting here.
I hear
is,
Do we have any others before we get deep into convo? Because I do think we will launch into that. Any other big fears that you're worried about?
Well, on a more personal level, I would worry about screwing up a transaction.
Okay.
Not putting an amendment in there to protect buyer or seller when they should have been protected.
Okay.
And so when you get close to closing,
You have the realization that.
they're exposed.
Okay. So let's do that one because that one's the easiest to answer out of these three.
I think
It's the most concrete example of a fear, which I think is fine. Messing up a deal. What can we do to avoid messing up a deal?
well, some of that's out of our control.
No, go to
No, it's
class.
not.
No. You can
No, it's not. Because remember, what he said was his fear is he is messing up the deal. Not that somebody else does,
Okay,
because
yeah.
somebody else can screw up the deal, but in theory, if you're representing your client and you've done what you're supposed to do, you should have protected them as best you can.
Appropriate.
I think his fear, let me restate it, your fear is that you get to a certain point in the transaction, you realize that your client is exposed in some way to some liability, and it's your fault.
Can you
Right?
give an example of
Right,
that?
absolutely.
So an example would be, I forgot to put a number in the appraisal contingency paragraph. So there is no appraisal contingency because the default is 0, basically. So now all of a sudden the appraisal comes back, the seller says, psych, I'm not doing it, and you can't have your earnest money. Now that's his fault because he didn't put a number in.
Okay.
That's a real life fear that I wish more agents had. Because I really think that that's one of those things that people don't
You
pay
gotta
enough
think through
attention to,
deals.
like, the details. So one of the things I'll share with you, we talked about the other day in a manager's meeting, were the traits of a very successful listing agent and a very successful buyer's agent. Do you know what the only common, well, there's two common traits that they have? One, they're both driven by money. Shocking, right? This is a sales industry, so you sell to make money. Two, they're both not detail-oriented people. They both thrive in somewhat of a chaotic environment. Their attention to detail is not great. When you have a lack of attention to detail, what happens?
Errors and omissions.
Right, errors and omissions and this stuff. So let's talk about some potential ways that you could kind of protect yourself by protecting them. So we have errors and omissions, right? So for us, it's legal defense. Now, that only really protects you if you don't do something really stupid that you should have done.
Like earnest money.
Right. I mean, you can't, it doesn't protect you from doing something wrong that you should have not done, that you shouldn't have done, right? So there's minimal protection. Okay, what else could you do?
I would say one of the things I do is if I have a similar transaction, I go back and look at the file of
Okay.
a previous transaction and see what amendments were in there, what the days were, that sort of thing. So that, if you,
That's all well and good, and
if you got through one of them,
but let's take into consideration where we are right now. You write a contract right now for an FHA loan, and you do it at 45 days.
it's the closing. It doesn't matter 45 days.
But the reality is that with the TRID numbers, should that be pushed out about a week or two? Probably.
Yeah.
And so now you're looking at the numbers from before, comparing them to what you should do now. I'm just saying, a good example of there's been a massive change in the industry, right? We've shifted from being able to do Swift to not so Swift. And so if you're looking and you're copying over timelines that you used to use, it might not be applicable at this point.
Well, that's.
But I think it's a good
point.
practice.
That's a very good point.
But I think you got to take that into consideration.
And I totally agree. And that's.
We're all good. He totally agrees.
No, seriously. And I think that the voice of caution would say, even picking a closing date, because we've got 8 days now, unilateral kind of thing, would be to go more because you can close early.
Right. You can always close early.
Caution.
As long as everybody's in agreement.
Push the days out.
I would. All right. What else could you do?
So
What about like things like this? Remember with 52 weeks, what we do? How many weeks do we spend on the contract? Right, remember?
26.
Not quite. We spent 9 weeks covering the contract. Okay, we covered the contract, we covered the exhibits, we covered the special stiffs, we covered everything in great detail, right? That's 9 hours of just pure excitement. She's trying not to laugh over there because I understand contracts are boring. They're not the most exciting part of our job, okay? Unless you're an attorney background or maybe an accountant, maybe. Contracts are really boring, but they're kind of the foundation of what
You're really important.
gets us from one step to the other. So I would say the training is absolutely important. So we have 9 hours of video, but that's just to get to where we are. That's not to get with future changes, because that was done before TRID came into being. So the numbers and things we talked about there. Now, the way we talked about it, we talked about risk analysis. So we never really said you should do 7 days due diligence or whatever, right? We talked about your client risk analysis. So that's a difference. But it's still, you got to go back. What else can you do?
Review the contract with your broker.
I think that's a good one. Now, here's the hard part. Optimally, when would you want to review the contract with your broker?
Before
Days
it's signed.
Before it's signed, right? So we'll go with before it's signed.
A little late after it's executed.
Well, but if you don't happen to be able to get it reviewed before, for whatever myriad of reasons, maybe it's a multiple offer situation and it's a Saturday night at 11 o'clock and I have no life, so you can call me. But other than that, you know, maybe you just aren't able. You got to do it so fast, you aren't able to do it. You're sitting with your clients, you just got to get it done. If you don't get to review it before you get it signed, what should you do?
You could
Right,
write it.
review after.
Get it reviewed
Right
after, right?
While you're in due diligence, for sure. I mean, if you're on the buyer side, but
Right. Well, because typically the buyer side are writing the contracts, right?
Right.
But the same sort of thing says, if you get an offer, and this happens all the time with every level of agent we have, you get an offer and you're the listing agent, don't be afraid to come in and review that with me, okay? Because that's what we do. That's what we're here for. We do want you to protect your clients at all costs. And that's part of what we are here for, okay? What else?
Time permitting, put the contract down for 5 to 10 minutes, and then go back and just review it fresh over. That's if you have the time to do it. Just step back and let it sink in. And
Pause and self-review process. It's good. That's a very good one. If you know that you're going to be meeting with your clients the next morning to put in a contract, write it the night before as best you can. And then look at it again the next morning.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I have another one that you might consider. How many of you explain line by line to the client?
the entire contract?
Yeah.
You mean line
when
by
you're
line?
doing that, you're actually doing a review. You're doing it in front of somebody to catch.
And how do you know what their risk buttons are? How do you know what their scare factors are as we
Oh,
talk
when you
about
do
scary
that.
things?
You're doing that.
If you do that, you go through every possible scenario. You go through all of the issues, the situations. This paragraph is written to protect us in the way it works is we have X number of days to get the appraisal in and back to the seller. If it doesn't come in, then the seller, we have to present the amendment to reduce sales price, which we cannot, of course, ask for less than the appraised value, but we can ask for down to that. And then the seller has 3 days to respond to that. And if they choose to not lower the price, you have the option to terminate the contract. Let's talk about what kind of loan you have. What does that mean? If you have an FHA loan, if the appraisal comes in high and they won't reduce the price, can you still buy the property? If you can come up with the cash, you can. So that's that conversation. That's when you really make sure that your client is fully on the process and understands what's going on. Now, a lot of people will say, it's too much time, it's too tedious, it's too hard, it's too much effort. They don't want to hear it all. I've given it to them so they could read ahead of time. Now, yes, if you gave them a sample copy of the contract,
You never do that.
well,
You just
some people do,
e-signature and
and that's the problem. With e-signature, we just send it over to our clients, they sign it, it auto sends to the
it's
other
done.
side.
Yes, auto sends.
We've never sat down and gone over the contract with them. So my point is, if you represent a buyer or a seller, I would review the contract before you get one. Because think about it, if you review the contract before you actually either write one or receive one as the seller, you now know what their hot buttons are. You now know already, as a listing agent, I need to put in some protection modes for these few things. So maybe I put a comment in the private remarks that adjust the timeline. Or maybe they've been burned significantly in the past with mortgage pre-approval. So I need to make sure that the person that they're getting pre-approved with is somebody that I believe is actually running their credit and doing what they're supposed to do. I can ask, if the seller wants us to, we can ask that all prospective buyers be pre-approved by lender X. They don't have to use them, but we want to make sure that they are viable buyers before we take our property off the market. If a buyer says no to that, where's the red flag, right? Because it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't hurt you in any way to get a pre-approval. Just a thought. All right, what else can we do?
Yes, well, I've got one more. And it really would be parenthetical to pause and self-review.
Okay.
It would be, don't rush.
I think that's a good one.
Think it through before you do it. I mean, I have some of my best ideas, you know, and I'm just, you know, sitting here thinking about, okay, this is a transaction. It's a condominium. Need a condominium exhibit, which is new, relatively.
Well,
Relatively. I mean, we didn't have it when I was here. We had a separate purchase and sales agreement
right, when you started.
when I started. I mean, so don't rush.
Yeah. So here's a way. What if you know what your client's going to buy, right? They're going to buy a single family home, they're going to buy a condo, they're going to buy a tiny house, whatever, right?
You'll screw up that term sheet.
But
First
what if you take and put together the contract package before, knowing what property type and what loan type we're already working with, right? Because you should know that stuff relatively early in the process. The occasional person might bounce back and forth, or maybe they're looking at townhomes, so they might be fee simple and they might be condo ownership. So there's some bounce back there. But overall, you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to need to write. So go ahead and pull it together. The other thing I would suggest is use the office packet. That's in Forms Pro.
Okay, I'm gonna take exception to that.
Okay.
And the reason is, if you use like buyer seller packet, you get 20 documents.
Correct.
You're gonna use 4 or 5.
Correct. And so you want my argument for that?
Go ahead.
There's a reason why I said that. And the reason is because when you dump that packet into your buyer and it dumps 20 some odd documents in there, and you don't necessarily need all of them. As you go through the documents, you can delete the ones that you've dumped in there that you don't need.
But
So that you can pare it
is
down.
what you're saying.
But you have to think, okay, here's the, I don't know, community disclosure agreement. Do I need to keep this in here or not? You have to make that conscious decision. The purpose of this packet is to provide you every possible form that you most likely need. I know that's really kind of a double entendre, so to speak, because you're not really going to get all of them. I didn't put all of the forms in. There are 100 and some odd forms. But I put in the ones that I think you should be using on most transactions. So for instance, as you go through and you see that there's this condo exhibit, if you know you're not doing a condo, then you can delete it. But if you are doing a condo and you might have forgotten it, well, now it's right there. And so you have to physically say, I don't need the condo. Oh, wait, I'm buying a condo. Okay, right? And so it really is a good exercise. And there are some forms in there that you might think to yourself, oh, I don't need this. Take a minute to look at it. Take a minute to look at it and see, well, maybe I do need this. Maybe this would be useful. I venture to say that the community association disclosure is probably applicable to 90+% of the transactions in the city, because there's some sort of association affiliated with the property. It may not be a condo association, it may not be a mandatory HOA, but there might be something that you could use that to disclose and find out about. So just thoughts. All right, anything else? I think that's pretty extensive.
Pretty, yeah.
Not pretty at all.
I'm putting stay current on the training portion because I think that's important, right?
Well, everything changes every year.
It
Or
does.
something does.
Something changes. They change stuff a couple of times. These days, we're changing stuff at least twice a year in the contracts. There's usually a January release and usually one later in the year, typically springish, summer. So, you know, you just have to, I mean, we've had a couple of years where we've had 2 or 3, you know, 3 or 4 releases, and you just gotta pay attention to them. I will tell you that just to make you feel better, if you call me and ask me a contract question about a specific contract, do you know what's the first thing I do?
You got the most current contract?
I pull it up so that I can look at what is the exact language, because there are so many changes. It's hard sometimes to remember, because those of us that have been in the business for a while, well, we've been in the business long enough to know what the right to request repairs is. Well, newer agents don't even know what that is, because you haven't had to ever deal with it. You've only done due diligence, which is great. It's way easier.
About amendment to address, or?
No, there didn't used to be an amendment to address. There used to be an amendment to request repairs.
Oh, okay, okay.
And so, you know, those are, when you've had so many different contract iterations, you have to make sure, okay, which one are we talking about? Like, I feel like there used to be a clause that said this, not sure if it's still in there, pull it up, look at it, make sure. I mean, that, and my recommendation when you have a question, the first thing I will always ask you is, what does the paragraph say? Because if you have a question about, for instance, let's go back to the appraisal. What does the paragraph say in the appraisal paragraph about how long the seller has to respond? And what do you have to do as the buyer's agent? Do you just send them the appraisal? Does that work? If you send the listing agent the appraisal, are you done with everything you're supposed to do? No. Because if you need the price reduced, you have to send them an amendment to reduce sales price. And if you don't, you have voided that option for yourself and your client if that timeline passes. So you have to send that over, and that kicks off that 3-day timeline for the seller to respond.
If that's what you put in.
No, I think it's 3 days.
Is 3 days standard?
The standard, that's 3 days. The timeline in the appraisal paragraph is how long you have to get the appraisal done and back to them. That's the other question. You got to pay attention to, if the timeline is 10 days and the appraisal gets done on the 9th day, so well within the time, but I don't get them the amendment to reduce sales price until the 11th day, am I okay?
No.
The appraisal was done before.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, you've got to get them in that amendment. Those are the little things that you got to pay attention to, timelines. One of the other super important, I'll throw in here, help yourself from messing up a deal. Use the important dates form.
That's a good one. And then put it on your calendar.
Put it on your calendar, right? Set yourself a reminder on your calendar that says, okay, due diligence ends tomorrow night. Better make sure I've got everything straight. One of the most important things for that particular form is, you know, everything in the contract is done by days, right? So it's 10 days due diligence, okay? So 10 days due diligence. Let's see, okay, so today's the 1st. So we start with tomorrow's the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, right? Is that right? 11th?
Tomorrow's
11th, so that's 10. Okay, so the 11th is my end of due diligence, right? Well, the way our contract is written with that paragraph about timelines ending on weekends or holidays, 10th is a holiday or a Saturday or a Sunday. Now all of a sudden, if it's a Saturday, it's really not the Saturday, it's not the Sunday, it's the Monday. So now we're the 12th, 13th. So if you write in the form, you put in the 12th or the 13th, whatever, the right date. When you send that over to the other side, if they have any question about it, if there's going to be an argument about when due diligence ends, you don't want to have it on the 11th or the 12th. You want to have it now.
Up front, yeah.
So that you make sure that everybody's on the same page. Because you really don't want to be scrounging, because everybody's negotiation strategy is based on what their timeline is, right? And if they think, oh, well, the buyer must not have had anything, they didn't submit anything, and they get whammed with something on a Sunday or a Saturday when they think it's over already, they're freaking out. So just as a thought, you know, I think that's a good form to use to keep everybody on track. All right, so that was a very good concrete fear. I think the other two are also ones that you should be paying attention to. Let's go back historically for a minute. 15, 20 years ago in real estate, what was the role of the realtor?
To find a property.
Correct, right? If you wanted to go buy a house, you had to go to an agent, right?
There was no Zillow.
There was no online battery of 100,000 websites that you could go to. There was no, you just couldn't do any of that. So if you wanted to know, you could drive around and hope you passed a sign so you'd know what the houses for sale were, or you'd walk into a real estate office and get an agent so that they could look through their, at the time their MLS was not computerized, it was a book, and the book was published every so often. So you list property and it might be however long before the next book is published. Your property is not even being, like, talk about a delay in being able to sell a property, right? Whereas now you list a property and you can literally have it sold within hours of listing it, because as soon as it goes in the computer, 100 million people see it.
And agents have searches out there.
Agents have all the searches set up, so it auto goes right to the clients. I mean, they literally, if your thing is set up the right way, and I should stop shaking the camera, making everybody a little bit nauseous. If you have a search set up for your client, when somebody lists something that matches their criteria, they will know about it in less than 15 minutes.
Well, I had a listing binding last month, 4 days.
Yeah.
I listed something last week, got an offer today. It was listed on Tuesday. And so the offer is in this morning. And just as an aside, a personal aside, when I was in college, I worked part-time as a courier. And those listing books came in every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
And I delivered them to every Northside
Oh,
Drive
my
office
Oh my word.
in town.
The Northside agents.
Johnny Isaacson was
Yeah.
the head of Northside.
Mhm.
And Barton and Ludwig. So,
Yeah.
so
Big books.
big
Just
books.
and minimal
And they
information.
They charged agents a lot for those.
They
books.
charge a lot of money for those books, because you think about it, I mean, the cost, can you imagine the cost to basically print a new phone book every
2 weeks.
2 weeks, you know? And I mean, it was just exorbitant. Now, you know, the technology and everything that goes into the MLS systems today is expensive. It's not cheap, but it's extremely more efficient. It's a lot better use of the dollar than those books were. And so that's been a big change in our role as an agent, because now anybody with a smartphone can find every single piece of property that's for sale. They don't need you to find the property. With the advent of all of the media that goes with these listings, right? We think that you should do high-res photos, video walkthroughs. These new 3D floor plan things are really cool. With all of that, you don't even really have to physically step inside the house to see it. Now, most people are not comfortable enough to buy a house without actually physically stepping foot in it. But I will tell you, it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening more and more and more. And as the technology gets better, if you think about it, that 3D floor plan, they literally take a camera and move it around the house and place it every, I don't know, 8 to 10 feet, something like that. And it takes a 360-degree picture of everything. There is no more hiding the ugly refrigerator because you took a picture at this angle and just didn't happen to include it. With those, there, you know, a lot of the tricks that used to be used with photography for real estate, which ultimately I don't think are beneficial, because getting somebody in the house and then surprising them with something that they're not going to like. One of the photographers I used to work with was always quoted as, you know, if there's a pickup truck in the backyard with weeds growing around it, you need to make sure it's in the picture somewhere. Why? Because when the buyer shows up at the house to do the walk into the house and they walk out the back deck and, oh, this is beautiful, oh, what the is that? They're going to be mad and they're going to go home. If they knew that that was there and it's not a deal breaker for them, now if they showed up at your house, they're actually serious, like they're a legitimate potential buyer. They're not just there to look and see what it really looks like. The concept that you need to go show a house to see what it really looks like, think about it as a buyer's agent. If every buyer could feel relatively comfortable based on the media that's online, that they have a good idea of what that house really is, how many showings would you really have to do? The era of having to do 20 or 100 showings to a single buyer all across town would be gone. Because you would only go see the properties that you actually were interested in buying. Because you've already seen them. I mean, the virtual showing is as good, if not better, because you can take your time. And you don't have to worry about your inconveniencing anybody. You don't feel rushed. You don't have to worry about, oh, it's getting close to traffic. I'm hungry, whatever. Oh, yeah, look at that room. Oh, you know, that ties into that. Yeah, that looks nice. And it's right there in front of you.
You know, if you go back 20 years, go back 17 years, 18 years. In 1997, that'd be what? That'd be 17 years.
Something like that.
I sold my home through a realtor. I called a high-performing realtor, and they came over and looked at it and said, blah, 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 yes. And a man saw it on their website in Ohio and never came to see it and bought it.
Sight unseen.
Sight unseen, bought the house. Based on the pictures they took and blah, 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 the description they wrote and everything else. But, you know, so 20 years ago, I don't know if people were still schlucking around books, but now one of the things that is so interesting is the level of online data and the quality of your production that is expected because everyone else is setting the bar
Right.
so high.
Well, if you think about it, so that agent in 97 was a pretty advanced agent compared to most back then, to be taking advantage of the web and all of that in 97. So the fact that they had those good pictures and got that house sold without somebody even having to see it, that's impressive. Today, you want to be that agent. You want to be the one that has that high level, that high expectation, because there are still plenty of agents, right, that use their cell phone to take pictures of their listing, and they don't even stop walking to take the pictures, right? You can tell that they're still moving because there's just that slight blur effect in every room. You can't quite tell what the wall
You don't like
covering
that
is.
effect?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's cool when you do this the expressway with all the lights or whatever. You know, that's kind of cool. You get that trailing light effect. I'm not such a big fan of it in trying to shoot somebody's house and let you see what it looks like.
Well, the other way to take pictures is not to take them. Just go to the previous FMLS listing
Oh yeah, people do that all the time too.
and borrow those. Who owns those pictures?
They are
Literally.
yours. If you spend the money or time to take pictures, they are your property. So if
Even though they're
the next agent comes along and takes them, all you have to do is call FMLS, they'll take them down. If they match the previous listing, they will take them down. But they only do it if you ask.
And the previous agent's never gonna look anyway.
Well, they should.
Well, if what you can do though is ask the office staff.
Because if you
here to
lose a
take the pictures
listing,
down.
you should.
No. I mean.
Oh, you're talking like old. Yeah.
Like it was sold a year ago.
Right.
And now
Yeah.
they're selling
Well, I mean,
today,
again,
and
if
you're not gonna.
If it's in a market that you're working, in theory, you should see it when it comes up, and you should recognize it. Go, oh, I listed that house. Hey, wait, those are my pictures.
Yeah.
Because the other problem with that, in particular, is that you're talking about pictures that are a year or two old that aren't necessarily still valid, right? I mean, what is the property might not look like that.
At what price point though, sidebar,
Mm-hmm.
at what price point do you not take an iPhone picture?
I believe you should do professional photography at every price point, period.
Okay.
But
$115,000.
yes,
You would spend.
$50,000 junk house, I would get a professional photographer. Do you know why?
Or what?
Because I want to make sure that the level of service that I'm providing is consistent to every client that I work with. And I want to make sure that they are getting a high level of service, because it's more important to me that they feel like they're being treated the same as everyone else and getting the best of the best than it is for that immediate dollar return on that particular transaction. Because in this business, it's all about relationships, right? And the long-term effect of that is significantly better than the short term. We used to talk about it all the time with people that did REO properties, you know? I mean, they get paid less money, they get this, that, and the other. But, I mean, those asset managers, if you do that level of service, there were agents that you could see that did that, and therefore they got more listings. And so, yeah, you're spending a little bit more per listing, but you got a pipeline of free business, you know? Nothing's free, but you pay for it in the front or the end, one or the other, right? So I think it should be on every price point.
Right.
I mean, I think, you know, it's kind of the comment of, you know, I love the preview stuff. I love the fact that Talbot developed using movie studios and using video back in the 30s.
Right.
That's impressive to me. So what I always say is your house unfortunately doesn't meet the criteria of a previous property. And so therefore it won't be on these extra 60 websites, but I'm still going to use the same caliber of marketing that I would use for a $2 or $3 million house with your $200,000 house. Because I want professional results. I want professional exposure for your property because I know it makes a difference. And that's you know, that's my take on that.
All right.
All right.
Fair.
So we know historically that our role has changed from that of the information keeper to what? What is our role right now?
Facilitator.
A facilitator?
A transactor.
A transactor? Is that all? Do we bring anything to the table?
Well, risk mitigation for sure.
Risk mitigation, okay, that's a good
That's what I mean
way
by
to look at
transactor.
it. I got you. That just sounds a little light. So we're help mitigating risk. We're helping them negotiate, right? Are we in any way still an information provider?
Oh, yes.
Oh, absolutely.
You should be. If you have a client, a buyer that knows more about the properties than you do, you're not doing your job right. Because you should know more about the market. You should know more about the trends in the market. What's happening in the areas? You know, what's going on in that area? Brookhaven. What's going on in Brookhaven right now as far as development goes? Is it an environment of positive development? Is it an environment of overdevelopment? Is it an environment of underdevelopment? Is it environment? I don't want you to answer that because we don't want to get into that conversation. But those are the kinds of things that you need to understand. You need to know, okay, is this a neighborhood that is relatively stable and kind of where it is? Or are we talking about a neighborhood that could potentially be in some sort of flux, right? That could have some sort of massive issue that would cause it to
Commercial development.
Right.
You need to know.
You know, is there a Wally World going up in the backyard?
You need to know
All
schools.
these houses are going to back up to the back of a big commercial center?
Schools.
Is there a big redistricting of schools coming? Is there conversation about the schools coming? Is there something going on in the schools that they need to know about? How do they find out about all that stuff? How do you know about all that stuff? Do you participate in those kind of conversations? I know you went to a thing the other day about the Fulton County schools, right?
Sandy Springs.
Sandy Springs. Well, technically it's Fulton County,
Yeah,
right?
but it was
Geared towards the Sandy
purpose
Springs
was
area.
a real estate commission. And the question that came back from other realtors to the county was, how do we get information on Sandy Springs schools alone? And Fulton County's response basically was, well, we have Fulton County on the website. But the fact of the matter is, as a realtor, you're trying to sell a school in Sandy
Right.
Springs and could care less about a school in southern Fulton County. And they just don't.
Well, just because they
don't
aren't
relate to that.
the same. And so you can't relate one to the other.
No.
I mean,
The county wants you to do it that way.
well, they're looking at a county-wide, right? But they're an awfully big county to be looking at it that way, as
Yeah.
many of them are. The
Well, they
diversity
should
across.
have their website though laid out so that
You could pick
an
out
individual school
right.
and take a look at the test results in an individual school.
easier said than done.
Exactly.
So, you know, is what it is. But
Bad website.
that's the kind of stuff that you as an agent bring to the table, right? Because you do have information, whether you have the information or you have the source for the information. You might know where they need to go to get it. You know, yeah, okay, great schools or whatever, right? But is there some other source that people need to be aware of to understand what's going on in whatever school or whatever school? Okay, thoughts? What else do we do currently? So we negotiate, we risk mitigate, we provide some information, but maybe not the same basic information that we used to.
Well, I mean, we get them to the closing table. I mean, we know the process.
Okay,
A lot of people don't know the process.
so we can educate on the process to make sure that there's no surprises. We were talking about earlier, right? By going through the contract and knowing, okay, this is how this works as we go step by step by step by step through the whole thing, right?
Talking to the attorney, talking to
And
the
making
lender.
sure they understand that whole process, right? And to some extent, our job still is. Now, remember, in the old days, our job used to be very heavily that we manage the lenders. Well, we don't necessarily manage them, but we need to stay on top of them. We need to make sure that
Like the
they are
appraisal.
doing what they're supposed to be doing. So the appraisal is done when it's supposed to be done, so that the timelines are met. Because
And
even though, and we,
particularly now,
more importantly now, sure.
you know, I need it clear to close, and I
3
need a
days
closing
before.
document 3 days before.
Right.
You know,
And they have to have it in their hand, not, oh yeah, that's on its way.
in their hand though could be email, right?
Agreed,
Okay,
but
okay.
on its way
I just want to
is
clear-
often the comment of, yeah, we'll get it out. Okay, checks in the mail kind of a
I just want
thing,
to
right?
clarify that.
And not trying to be mean to lenders, but I mean, you know, the history is what it is.
Yeah.
We also procrastinate on everything.
Mhm.
So that, you know, it's due on Friday. Well, I'll worry about that Thursday afternoon. And then if a problem arises, you know, it hits the fan and you got to get on it. Where if we would back off and say, I know it's due Friday, let's get this done earlier than later, so that if there is a potential problem, we can address it, you know, with some time that works for our advantage.
Mhm. I agree. I think that's one that a good agent is proactive about the things that need to be done, not reactive. So, that's going through and making sure that timelines are being addressed early, not giving yourself 24 hours to have the seller respond to your amendment to address concerns before due diligence ends. That not only is not very good business, it doesn't put the seller in a very good space, right? Because if they have to try to determine what the cost of things are or what anything is, and they don't have time to do that, well, they're just going to say no, right? Because they don't know what it is.
Deal's dead.
So now you've killed the deal. And so that's a big part of our job. I will agree with that. Getting to closing is a big part of our job. I think a big part of that is still, even with all the technology and all the data that they can have and all the way this can go, our job is to be the non-emotional party in the process, right? Because no matter what, there are very few buyers or sellers that are not emotional about the transaction in some way, right? Because it's either their home that they've lived in for many years, or maybe they redid it and they really feel attached to it, or the buyers are raising a family or moving to a new city, or whatever issue, whatever situation is causing them to spend money and buy a house is making them emotional and making them maybe not react in a commodity type of way. Now,
to that point though, I think a buyer would tend to be more emotional than the seller.
I've worked
I
with some
disagree with
pretty
that.
emotional sellers over the years.
Yeah, I know, but there was a real estate instructor, and I don't remember his name. He was over here. His advice was, when you have a listing, you need to say, Brett, I'm going to list your house. This is not your home anymore. This is a product to be sold. So just wrap your mind around that concept, and we'll have a much better negotiation and transaction. It's not your home.
Okay, you want me to counter that?
Easier said than done.
You counter everything I say.
I don't counter everything you say on purpose. I'm just saying that in this industry, there's all kinds of support to that. There are certain people that if you said that to them, they would say, get out. Now, you as an agent, myself included, might say, fine, good luck, and walk away, right? Because that's your decision as a business person. But there are certain people that are very emotionally directed type people, right? That's their direction. They're going to be more inclined to need a little bit of hand-holding, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of understanding. Now, here's the other side to that. One of the tools that coldwellbanker.com has is what? Related to this. The seller's emotion. It's the storytelling. So a seller can go on to coldwellbanker.com and submit their story. If you've seen the commercials, they're pretty compelling because they can say things and they can share that emotion that the buyer is going to connect to that you don't have, but you shouldn't have. That's not your job. I mean, you're supposed to be non-emotional about it. And so they can share as they walk around the pool and show the pool and say how awesome the pool has been for so many years and how for whatever reason. Or they love the location because of this and this and this. We walk down to the farmer's market and we walk across the street to the park, and my son was a skater, so he gets to skate at Brook Run and whatever, making stuff up, right? But that is that story that people can connect with because you're selling emotion. Real estate is a commodity driven by emotions. And so you want to use that. Yes, I agree. I think that it's important. I've always taught that when you're doing presentations, you start using the word home, and by the end of the presentation, you're using the word property or house or something much more generic, non-emotional. because you're trying to get them to do that, because yes, it will make it better if they transition from, but this is my home. No, it's not.
No.
Like, pack, go ahead and move out because we're selling it, right? Now, depending on who they are, you can say that very bluntly.
Well, hopefully you know them a little bit, you
Right.
know, so you can.
Exactly. And so you have to
mean-
have some kind of, and I get it, I know what you're saying, so I'm not countering it necessarily.
And
I'm
I
just
think-
saying that you want to,
And the other reason I think that buyers would be more emotionally involved is because they're looking for a home.
they are,
They're not
but
looking for a property. They're looking for a place to raise kids, get into the right school district, get in the right location.
maybe.
You know, maybe not.
But I guess from my perspective is, as far as a buyer's concerned, there are so many to pick from, right? So
But
I know that
But if
there's
they're under
more than,
contract.
no, I know, but before we get to the contract stage even, I know, and even after the contract stage, why do you think we have such a high fallout rate these days? Part of it is because the buyers know that there's more than one house out there that will meet their criteria. I had a client, an agent the other day, who had a client under contract on a beautiful condo in Buckhead. Beautiful. Phenomenal deal, great price, the right exposure, facing the right direction, the view that was killer. They backed out because their belief is that they weren't quite ready. Their house that they're trying to sell hadn't sold yet. They felt like, even though they could carry both, they felt like they wanted to wait, and there'd be another property to pick from. Well, if I go to Vegas and I throw the dice, sometimes it'll land on what I want it to, right?
Never has.
Sometimes. In theory, it can, but the odds are kind of stacked against me. And I guess that's kind of my fear, is that right now, buyers are still in that mode. Now, for a little while, when inventory was really low and buyers were just fanatic, right? They bought anything. People would buy stuff just because. And before the fall of real estate, back in the good old days, people bought the crappiest stuff because they realized, well, this is the best I can get. And if I do a little bit of this to it and a little bit of this to it, it'll be good. I like it. In today's market, the little bit of this and a little bit of that, they aren't willing to do. Very few of them. They want it already done. But they want it done the way they want it. So good luck. Read their minds, right?
It's interesting you say the fallout rate's high because there's nothing available.
There is more and more inventory available right now. There's more inventory available right now than there has been in months.
In what areas?
In most areas.
In most areas.
Most areas.
Okay.
The inventory is growing not only across our metro, but across the country. There is a legitimate pull towards a normalized market at this point. A normalized market is how much inventory? 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay. So 6 months worth of inventory. We are legitimately pulling towards that. We are right around 3 right now, which is higher than we have been in a long time. Now, when you go, it's much like any other generic market conversation. I can talk about the market has gone up or down X%, but this particular house might not have for whatever particular reason, right? Because every property is unique. And so the same thing is true with an inventory standpoint. You might have a buyer that's looking for this particular type of house, and there might not be very many of that one. But there's so many of these other ones that other buyers are buying, we are in that market. And so, that's really kind of where we look. And yes, small pocket areas do react differently as always.
Not sure.
And so, but generically speaking, we're in an inventory growth mode right now. More properties are coming on the market than are going off. So what's going to happen to prices?
Down.
They're going to go down,
Sure.
and they have been. So those are the kinds of things that we need to be telling people, right? That's where your value comes in as an agent, because you can bring that. That's your role. Educate. Educate, educate, educate. Educate on the process, educate on the market, educate on the appraisals and the situations and the reactions and the negotiation techniques and the risk management. Educate them on what their risk is, because how many people go into a real estate transaction and know what their real risk is? Not many. But your clients should, right?
You should explain that to them up front.
You need to explain that
you're
to
a risk mitigator, and
Right. And here are the risks
you know
that
the
could
amendments to
potentially
put in.
impact you. And as you, a unique buyer, which one of these are you concerned about? As a unique seller, which one of these are you concerned about? So that we can do a better job protecting against that one.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago, I showed a condo in Decatur to a dad and his son who was going to Emory, and he wanted to buy his son a condo. And so we got through and we went through all the common areas and blah, blah, blah. And I said, amendments you need to protect yourself. And he was the guy that changed all the contracts because he was also an attorney.
I know.
And so
I
we blew
remember.
that up. I mean, that never happened, but anyway. Can I make an announcement? Are we kind of through here?
We're pretty close, yeah.
Okay. I just want to let you guys know that I discovered something yesterday, that there is a new TV show on WeTV selling real estate in the ATL.
Oh yes, there are some agents out of the Buckhead office that are in that.
Okay.
Mhm.
And Bono Ansley's going to be in there. That's where I found out about it on Facebook. He posted. And it premieres first week in November. I don't
At least I think that's the same show. I would actually, just because
No.
the other one, it's kind of like the Real Housewives of
Yeah,
Atlanta
yeah.
meets real estate.
Yeah.
And we all know how well that went.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So anyway, I just want to let y'all know.
All right. So I often do, and we had the conversation I was walking in this morning, the topic, right? So I'm going to tell you what the topic is for next week. You ready?
Ready?
Somebody remind me.
Go.
One of the ways to help yourself from messing up the deal, if you're a salesperson and you don't have a great attention to detail and you don't have a great eye for that little speck, why not hire somebody that does? So next week, we're going to talk about virtual assistants. Okay? Because in reality, how many of you are at the point in your business where you can hire a full-time staff person that you're paying $30,000, $40,000 a year? Anybody? Right? That's not, I mean, you have to be pretty successful to want to hire somebody like that. Okay? The reality is with a virtual assistant, you have a different option. And so we're going to talk about that next week and what the options might be for you, even if you are relatively new and starting out in the business, because think about it. The time you spend writing the contract, the time you spend doing any paperwork for that matter, is that productive time? Are you making money at that moment?
Depends where you are in the process.
Really doesn't matter where you are in the
No,
process,
if you're starting
because
off, it helps you learn the contract better. So.
okay, I'll give you that. But at the end of the day, that's still just development. That's not actually profit. So if you could spend the time that you spend doing paperwork out either getting other clients or working with other clients, wouldn't you make more money? And so that's what we're going to explore. And we're going to have a conversation about it. To be honest, I don't know which way it might go. I'm hoping that we get a good number of people in the room so that we can have a good conversation, because I think there can be an argument made for it, but I'm sure there can be an argument made against it as well. And you knowing me, I will probably make both of them. But I think it's worth exploring, and I think it's something we should look at, because thanks to the world of technology, the concept of a virtual assistant is very different today than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. If you think about it, everything we do is paperless, right? So whether you have that person across the table from you or you have that person across the world from you, it doesn't matter because they can still do the same job for you. So, all right. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. And tell your friends that next week we'll be talking about virtual assistants.
Will,